Welcome to DataViz Daily. I'm Kevin McGinley. I'm here in lovely San Antonio, Texas, where we just wrapped up Kscope 17. And I took a little bit of a break from doing DataViz Daily videos so that I could work on my Kscope 17 presentation as well as a hands-on lab that I was given. And I thought I'd do a quick episode to just sort of emulate a little bit about what we did during that hands-on lab, that session. So what you're seeing here, I'm in the Oracle Analytics Cloud, and what this session was really geared towards was data visualization for the finance analyst. This is being able to take in the OAC product the data visualization capability connected to Essbase Cloud and try to do some things that would help a finance analyst, maybe even some things that would be better than using Excel. So you can see here I have a connection for the Essbase within OAC. I'm going to create a new data source, and this is going to open up all the different Essbase cubes that I have within Essbase Cloud. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and point to a P&L cube, and I'm going to give this a particular name here. I'm just going to call this, first cube or something like that. Just give it a unique name. I've imported this cube many times before. I've given it many different names each time I do it, so this is just sort of one of those, just try to find a name that hasn't been used before. And let's kind of scroll down here, and we've got now that cube defined as our first cube. And I'm going to go ahead and create a DV project out of that. So we're going to open up another window here, and I'm not going to walk through the entire sort of visualization examples that I gave just in the interest of time. But what you're seeing here right now, what's happening is, I don't have any data elements over here yet. And that's because currently what DV is doing is taking the cube outline, flattening it out for the accounts dimension that was part of the P&L cube, so that it can turn all of those different accounts into individual measures. And you'll see when this pops up what that looks like and why this is taking so long. This is actually a really big accounts dimension. So for the first time that you connect to the cube, it does take a little bit of time for DV to go ahead and read that in and present all the corresponding data elements. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with DV, once we get our data elements over here from the Essbase cube, we'll be able to drop them here on the visualization canvas. Data visualization comes with sort of 3 different areas that you can work within: prepare, visualize, and narrate. We're going to spend most of our time here in visualize, but I will go ahead and bring in an example of a couple spreadsheets real quick to show you what you can do in the prepare tab as a simple example. So you can see here we've got first cube. We've got a variety of different dimensions: periods, store, years, scenarios. If you expand any one of these, you can see within store I've got metrics for state and store city. These were renamed generations within Essbase Cloud so that we could make them more friendly names for data visualization, and that's something that you can do right within Essbase Cloud. But we're going to go ahead and just real quick add scenario as a filter. I'm just right-clicking on scenario. That adds it to this filter bar up here. And I'm going to select actual, because those of you who are Essbase users know using an Essbase cube, you often have to filter on certain dimensions first for this to kind of make sense and be applicable. Doesn't make sense to look, for example, at your final and working versions at the same time. Those don't add up together. Same thing with your scenarios. Actual versus forecast and budget doesn't make sense to combine them, so you have to look at them individually. And then, as I promised you, we would kind of scroll and look at this P&L cube here, or this P&L dimension, which is the flattened accounts dimension. And you can see here, even just reading in the getting prepared to display all the values inside of it, taking just a while just to expand the folder here. And again, this is something that will be pretty common when you're working with a pretty big cube, but you can see here as I scroll down, all the different nodes within the accounts dimension hierarchy have become individual measures. And why this is important in DV is that we do a lot of visualizations where we have to drop measures in specific places for those charts to render in a particular way. So I'm just going to scroll all the way back up to the top here. Now what we can do is, if you see that add calculation in the bottom left hand corner here, we can click that and we can sort of rename some of these metrics quickly. So I just double-clicked on the 2120-net income there, and I can quickly create a sort of a pointer to that metric just called net income. And that will allow us to more easily access it, but also have a more readable name. So again, I'm just double-clicking on the measure, typing in a new name here, and you can think of this as just sort of like referencing a column or a cell within an Excel spreadsheet, because we can basically, just kind of create that pointer. Over here on the right-hand side, there are all kinds of functions that are available to you that you can use in a very Excel-like fashion. Some of them will be, pretty familiar to you. Some of them are very similar to things you can do in Excel, but just might have a slightly different name to it. And so once we create those three measures, which yes, we did conveniently number them so that they would be right at the top there, I've now got them down here in my calculations, meaning I can get to them very quickly and easily. And so the very first thing that I can do here is take state and something like cost of sales, right-click, do pick visualization, and I can very quickly create a map of the United States. In this case, our cube has data within the upper northeast only, so you can see how that data is sort of shaded in heat map fashion, with the darker blue having a higher cost of sales. So there are a variety of different visualizations that one can do. I can come here and do something like net income. I can have a tile that displays, and I can come in here to the properties of that tile and actually do some things to format the number a little bit better. So if I want it to be a currency and have it be abbreviated with no decimal points, I can actually have that, and I can drag these around, have them go wherever I want. I can even do things like take cost of sales and selling expense and store city and have the tool decide what visualization to pick for me. In this case, it's gone ahead and picked a scatter plot, which is a nice way to represent the sort of difference between two measures. Another way that you can do the difference between two measures is something called a tree map. So I can come in here and do a pick visualization and pick something called a tree map as well. So you can see here I've got those four visualizations going. I can also do some clever resizing here. So if I want these two to be a little bit bigger, maybe I want my map to have a little bit more width to work with. Maybe I want to come in here and change the properties a bit, so I can set some zoom up, make it a little bit easier to kind of manipulate the map. So I can very quickly and easily create a canvas that I can work with, and then I can do things like turn off these sort of areas of the tool to just give me a little bit more room to work with. Now what I can do once I have those set up is I can create these things called insights. I'm just going to click on this add insight, and it creates an insight. Now what that's done is it's basically created a snapshot of my canvas, and now what I can do is as I interact with the canvas I can kind of keep track of these snapshots. So for example, if I wanted to highlight these points on the scatter plot, hey, those look like stores that have something in common. What stores are they? And let me look at them. So I can right click on them after I drag and select them and do keep selected, and you'll notice that adds them up here to the filter bar automatically, and each visualization gets changed to represent the filter values that are up there for those particular store cities. I could take a insight of that and I get a second insight. I can come back in here and then delete that filter. I can also do that same sort of type of activity on the map. I have this rectangle selection that I can do on the map if I want to just pick certain states here by doing a rectangular selection, and I can right click and do that same keep selected feature. Notice it highlights all of the different dots on the scatter plot and the boxes on the tree map for those things that I wanted to sort of keep and select. So I'm going a little bit quick here compared to what I did in the session at Kscope in the hands-on lab, but this has given you an idea here of how we can kind of keep taking these snapshots, and ultimately as I'm sort of working to try to figure out, well, why is something happening in my retail stores. If I right click here, I can remove a particular city, for example, So there's a lot of ways that you can interact with this data to try to get to the answer to a particular problem. And then ultimately, now that I've kind of created these 4 insights, what I can do is actually come into the narrate area, and I get my 4 insights at the bottom here. You can see these tabs all appear, insight 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can actually go into presentation mode, which kind of makes the interface disappear, and I can go through each of these insights from front to back or back to front, whichever direction that I want to go. I can add in annotations, things like that, to each insight. I can even add text boxes into the visualization so that I could put even more text on the screen. There's a lot that you can do, but ultimately this becomes like a little PowerPoint presentation where you can sort of page through in a meeting room if you're presenting to management, etc. And all of these things are still interactive. If I wanted to come here and say, disable that filter, I could have things go back to the sort of original view, and then toggle that back on, enable that filter again, and ultimately then you get the the look and feel that you had before. Sorry, I'm waving my family away here, staying in a hotel room while I record the video. So that gives you a feel for the sort of interactions that you can do while you're working on a particular canvas. Now what I wanted to do is actually build another visualization. This time what I'm going to do is come to subject areas here, and I've brought one of the other cubes within Essbase Cloud into the OBIE metadata layer. There's a mechanism for doing this within the OBIE admin tool that allows me to do some additional things that I can't do when I make a direct connection to Essbase itself. So this, you'll notice, loads much quicker because that metadata is already defined. It's also even searchable using this search bar. And I'm just going to do some quick things here. This is a very similar cube, but ultimately it's got its own set of sort of data elements that we have to filter on first. Very much the same as we did before, picking scenarios, picking versions, and in this case we're going to focus on a particular year as well. So we'll get here. And the other thing that this particular cube has that the other one did not is a full-on product dimension. So if I expand product here, you'll see a multi-level hierarchy that gives me the sort of number and description for each level in the hierarchy, but I don't really have any other product attributes that I can use within my visualization. If I come up here to data sources, though, I have an add data source in the lower right-hand corner here, and I can create a new data source and point to a spreadsheet that I happen to have. And this spreadsheet happens to give me a distinction on my different wine products as to what color the wine is and what varietal it is. So you can see here I've got blend, that gives me single varietal and blend, and I've got red and whites for my color. And if I come in here and match this up with my product dimension at the sub-item number level, which is what all these codes are that you see in here, and I'm just going to give this a unique name here because we've added this spreadsheet in many times during the hands-on lab. I've actually now just effectively done a VLOOKUP between my Essbase cube and an Excel spreadsheet that allows me to use both of these within the same data visualization project, so that I can do things like this, where I come in here, and if we collapse some of these and expand our measures, I've got sales, for example, and I want to see, if I come back to visualize, I want to see sales by color, and I'm going to let it create the best visualization from that. And you can see here I've got red, I've got white. Of course, I've got a lot of products in my hierarchy that have no color or no relationship to wine whatsoever. So I'm just going to remove those by right-clicking and doing remove selected there. And we've got, sort of a nice bar chart then of our sales of red and white wine. And I can even take something like blend and drag that into the color drop zone so that I get a color distinction here and a sort of a stacked bar effect of the difference between, red blends, white blends, red single varietals, white single varietals. So I can take this even a little bit further and do a more interesting visualization called a sand key that shows me the relationship between two things here. And so you can see we've got white and red on one side, blend and single varietal on the other. We've got very few white blends. We've got a lot of red single varietals, and then there's kind of the crossovers in between there. This is a different type of visualization that you probably can't easily do in Excel, but it's another way to kind of show the relationship between sort of two different pieces of information like that. I'm going to go ahead and delete this visualization and give you one more example of what you can do. Delete that filter there by adding one more file, and this time I'm going to add a measure. So I just showed you how you could expand a product dimension there with some attributes that normally wouldn't be in the Essbase cube. This time I'm going to show you how to add a measure that hasn't made it into the Essbase cube yet. Maybe it could be built in eventually, but maybe it just hasn't been added yet, and based on all the work that everybody has, it's not going to be added for some time. I'm just going to give it a unique name here, and you can see that by city, by year, by month, we have precipitation numbers. So I can come in here and match all of these against their corresponding dimensions. So in this case, city matches to store city. Now in this case, year, it already found the match because it detected a similar column within the cube called year, so I don't have to do that one. And then I can come over here to period, go to the period dimension, and since we have this by month, I'm going to pick month. And I don't have to do anything with precipitation because it's already determined that it's a sum aggregation. But if I wanted to change that to an average, see the average precipitation for a given city within a year or whatever, I could do that. But in this case, I'm going to leave it a sum and hit add. And now what that allows me to do is, if we look at our source diagram here, I now have the ability to have multiple files within my project joined to the cube in multiple different ways, some with a single join, some with multiple joins. And if I come here to visualize and get my data elements back up here, let's hide the wine varietals, I can take something like sales and precipitation and city and create the best visualization for that and try to understand how does precipitation affect sales within my stores. And you can see the cluster of all the stores here. They're a little clumped together, so I'm going to zoom in, get a little bit better visualization there, and right click again and add a trend line so that we can see the sort of exact relationship between high precipitation equals low sales, low precipitation equals high sales. I think we could have all guessed that. In this case, we actually fudged the numbers to make it work out nicely that way. But hopefully this shows you, sort of a quick way that you can go in and add a measure to the Essbase cube that doesn't already exist there, isn't going to be built into the cube anytime soon, but still allows you to do that analysis, comparing something that's already in the cube to something that's not. So that's a very rapid, super fast summary of what I did at Kscope 17 in my presentation called DV for the Financial Analyst, and a hands-on lab session of the same name. For DataViz Daily, I'm Kevin McGinley. Thanks for watching.